And cool. So I think are we live? Yes, we are live. So hello everyone. Today we have Megha with us, and Megha is a human rights lawyer to training and a development sector professional, and she's co-founder of Project DEFY to take forward her belief that for society to re-emerge, model of education has to go, and choice-based learning has to be the future of learning. So today she's going to talk about she's going to talk under democratic citizenship. So Megha, over to you.
Thanks, Ruchira. Thanks so much for the lovely introduction and for putting this together. This is fabulous. Hello, everyone who's joined us today evening. You know, it's very late in the evening. And thank you for whoever thinks they've taken out the time and joined us. So what I have signed up with Eduthon really is to be involved in the theme of what citizenship entails, what citizenship means in education policy, and therefore what is it that we can do more to put it at the center of pedagogy, at the center of any intervention that we are looking from the perspective of education. What I'm going to do today is give everybody a very eagle's eye view of what citizenship really means and what does citizenship education mean. And I'm going to pick up some examples from the European nations, from some studies that have been done in what building citizenship in young people and what citizenship education can look like, and leave it open-ended for participants to kind of think through these things as they look at creating solutions within this theme in the larger scope of the Eduthon, right? So I know the participants own the group and you don't have to unmute yourself, but I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and if people can type it in the chat, that will also be super helpful. So it kind of keeps me engaged, active. At any point of time, you want to stop me, you have a question, you have an opinion or something that you know, please put it in the chat, and I am looking at the chat constantly. So this is to the participants.
And I'm also helping you with Facebook, so that if there is someone who is saying anything on Facebook, then I'll tell you that also.
Perfect. That'd be great. So let's start. So my first question to generally the participants, even you, Ruchira, would be that, you know, what do you guys understand about citizenship? What, according to you, is the meaning or the definition of the word citizenship? The first thing that comes to your mind when you think citizenship. Do not Google this. Tell me from what you have read, learned over the years in your life. And you can put it in the chat box. I'll give you like a minute to do this for every participant to type in, what is citizenship? And I will go on mute while you guys do that. And you can define this from even the person perspective. So who, according to you, is a citizen? What do you think citizenship means in respect to a person? So however you think.
So I'll tell my definition after participants talk, and participants tell their definition. Yeah.
Sure.
So Amrita, Ayan, Raja, what do you think? What is your definition of citizenship?
Or a citizen, whichever one you want to take up.
Yeah.
Anyone? Nobody wants to take a shot at this? If I let you Google it, would you? Okay, so Ruchira, do you want to take a shot at it? Okay, I think we see
Yeah,
some.
someone is writing something. Yes. Citizen is being accepted as a member.
Great, great. That's got of a nation. That's got three very critical words in it. Uh,
Yes.
form the basis. Anyone who's born or residing in a country more than 5 years. Absolutely correct. That is
Yes.
a textbook definition of citizenship in a lot of education curriculum, in a lot of policy curriculum that is written. That's
Yes.
an
I
interesting.
think right to leave there, like as he said, getting accepted as the citizen, as a member, and having some responsibilities and rights
Mhm,
um, at
mhm,
that place.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely. So all three of you have actually incorporated a lot of things that do comprise a citizenship. So citizen, so if you go back to the word when citizen was formed, right, by Plato for the first time, right, it
Yes.
said that a citizen is a member of a political community who enjoys the rights and assumes the duties of the membership, right? So that incorporates who is a citizen, right?
Yeah.
And so what all of you have written, everything that you've written here comes in it incorporates three major aspects of citizenship, right? Which is citizenship as a legal status, right? Which is what a lot of us understand, correct?
Yes.
Which is the citizen is the legal person, right? Who can act freely, can do whatever he likes according to the law, right? And you can go and claim the law's protection if something happens to you, right? So, in this understanding of citizenship, where you look at citizenship from a legality perspective, which is, if I can stay somewhere for 5 years, I become automatically a citizen, right? In this
Right.
scenario, you do not expect the person who's at the center of this to be involved in the policy or the law formation. The person actively, as a citizen, stays within his ambit as long as he gets his rights and as long as he can seek the protection of law. It's not important that he's involved in the lawmaking. It's also not important that he is involved in the laws that are made that affect her. It's not
Yeah.
important at all, right?
Yes.
The second form of citizens are citizens that are considered as political agents, right? Now, in this form of citizenship, citizens actively participate in the political institutions, right? So they are at the center of lawmaking. They get involved when policies are discussed. They get involved when laws are made. Okay. And third is, the membership in a political community. This is an identity-based citizenship, right? So if you're part of a small political movement, right, within a larger country, your identity to that political community accords you certain citizenship, right? And what lies at the heart of the conversation on citizenship is that does citizenship lead to social cohesiveness and integration, or does it only mean that the person interacts with the institutions around herself, keeping herself out of it? Now, if you think of this, then there are basically across the world two models of citizens, all right? And what happens is that, so these two models come from obviously our old ages. So you have the republic model and the liberal model. So you have the Athens model, which is Aristotle, and then you have the Roman model, after Rome acquired a lot of territory, right? So um, the Athenian model says that the citizen is actively involved, right? It is
Yes.
involved in the lawmaking, in the policy making, and all of that. It is at the center of this. The Romanian model then professed, especially after war, that it is a set of rules that apply to everybody, even if you do not come from that same community. But the rule is similarly applicable to you, which means that it accords you the same set of protection that it accords to somebody else. Right now, over the years and over the decades, both these models have seen criticism and have seen critique. One is what I see in the chat room written, which is global scenario, globalization, right? And this is actually the newest critique on the concept of citizenship per se. The older critique came from first from the feminist groups, which said that in both the models, the center of the model are still a set of people who have privileges, which means that in the Athenian model, where you become participants in lawmaking, if you're a woman and if you're not part of the public sphere at all, then you actively do not participate in lawmaking. In the Romanian model, which is that law protects you and your interaction with the law is as a private citizen. But if men hold women as property, then the woman does not even get to interact with the set of rules at her own as a private individual. The third biggest conundrum that citizenship has entered into is the post-globalization world, is the post-nationalist world, so to say, where the post-nationalist groups say that citizenship has nothing to do with the idea of relating yourself to a boundary or to a country or to a state nation. Instead, has a lot to do with values, has a lot to do with what are the presetting values that a place or a set of people can evolve to which you feel connected. Now, all of this has meant that over the years, there is a huge push on also thinking how do you connect citizenships now to students, to universities, to schools, especially with the world moving in the way it's moving, with cultural risings, with diversity becoming the center focal of things, with immigration, with migration, with especially with so many wars happening across the world where it is displacing people and putting people in different parts of the world as refugees and who are trying to assimilate, who are trying to stay in particular countries and are seeking citizenship rights. But what does it all mean in terms of bringing it down to students in schools, to students in universities, and how do you break it down to that? So therefore, as a prelude to that, it's important to know where does the construct of this understanding of what comes with it comes from. So a lot of you have written, right, that which is it comes with its sets of rights, it comes with its sets of duties, right? Yes. And in a lot of countries, that's not necessarily the case. All right, in a lot of countries, there is a certain restriction on how you interact with the law based on what your understanding of citizenship is and what the definition of citizenship is. At this point, I'm going to take a pause. I know I've like thrown a lot of things out there. For everybody here, there is a presentation that I will send to Eduthon and they will make it available to all of you. I didn't want to use it right now because it's a lot of academic research in it, but yes, it has also to a lot of great research papers on this. But right now, I'll take a pause and see if anybody has any comments on really understanding the two major distinctions of citizens. One, where the person is involved yes, in making of the laws, and second, where she only interacts with the law and is not necessarily interested in the developing of the law. Any comments, any thoughts at this point from anyone? I'll be happy to take them.
Right now, I can't see them. But guys, if you have any questions or any thoughts, please share them with Megha. Megha is the right person to talk about that. Megha, you were talking about those research papers and all. So we would love to like read them. So if possible, please share them
Yes,
with
yes,
with our participants also, and we will share them in our learning material so that if they are really interested in this thing, then they can read them and get more insight about all these things.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to pass on the presentation to
Yeah.
you at the end. I have a folder. I'll
Yes.
share that with you
Yes.
and you can use it. I did not want to use it during this because I know people would get really overwhelmed. It's a very academic
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
All right. So there are no really big comments right now. I'll
Yeah. There is one big comment here. I think we have moved beyond these narrow definitions. There are sporadic instances, but hey,
not the rule.
are the exception, not the rule.
Another rule. Yeah, so Raja, this is interesting. So there is, and I'll share this paper. There's a Stanford paper on this, which talks about the global world, the new world, right, and the new understanding of citizenship. So, for example, Britain post the tube tunnel attack, right, back in almost 7-8 years ago, changed its citizenship law. It amended its law, right?
Yes.
Where it very specifically changed the earlier restriction on inside its Citizenship Act on taking away somebody's citizenship was very stringent. You had to show, the state had to prove that the person whose citizenship it wanted to take away posed a viable and a real threat to the state. It amended it and it said that this can now be done, citizenship can be taken away as long as there are conducive reasons to believe, right? So
Yes.
while the narrow definitions we want to believe are being broken down, in reality, what has happened is that over the years, every country has taken on a very stringent, I would say, over look on how it looks at the citizenship and citizens, right? So a lot of countries are actually going back to saying whether they ascribe to the Athenian view or the Roman view of citizenship. And there is now a huge conversation on what post-nationalist citizenship means. So both Athenian and Romanian and Roman, forms of citizenship and the definitions were based on strong connections to a place, strong connection to ideologies, values, etc., of the place where you're at, which meant that you ran into the risk of majoritarians views that you had to ascribe to. Post nationalism says that that is no longer relevant as long as a place, a set of people can base their ideals and can base the social values on equality, equity, all of that, then that should be enough to prove that I am an active part of this particular community. So
Yes.
while we want to believe that we are moving on from these narrow definitions, the fact remains that with the current global environment, countries are becoming more and more stringent on citizenship and how they want to define it. India
Yeah.
is an absolute example on that. Our latest debate on citizenship and who should be given citizenship comes
Mm.
from exactly this, comes from
Right.
this stance that a country is taking on who will it allow to be called a citizen. So our country is grappling with that debate as we talk, right? And
Yes.
you notice the foundation of the debate has absolutely nothing to do with equity, values, or any of those defining terms that we read in a lot of utopian books like the Constitution, but it has a lot to do with um, identity of the person, identity of a community, and identity markers of a community. So what we see actually globally is that a lot of countries are going back to the erstwhile definitions and not necessarily dropping them and moving to newer emerging definitions of citizenship. So that's in response to what you just said. I'm going to move on from here, and
Yes.
I'm going to, move to citizenship and education, right? And education, teaching citizenship, right? So
Yeah.
there's a question, right, which is that can we expect passive spectators of political life to become active citizens when we need it, right? So what
Hmm.
we necessarily see today is that everybody is a passive spectator, right? You and I, and not even students, are actively actually involved in political participation, right? There
Yes.
is an abstract understanding of how policies work, of how political representation work, of how even citizenship works, but there isn't necessarily an active involvement in it, right? And on
Yes.
this, there is this very interesting paper that was written in 1995, by Jean Fabien, and he said that, and this I quote here because I think this summarizes what we should be looking for, which is, and I quote him, that regular exercise of political liberty is the surest means of moral improvement,
Hmm.
opening citizens' minds and spirits to the public interest and to the importance of defending their freedoms,
Can
right?
you elaborate this?
So so the three parts to this, right? Where
Hmm.
one is that he specifies that exercising of political liberty, right, which is from passive spectators to becoming active participants, right, is the surest means of moral improvement. And he believes that when people who've just been watching from outside get actively involved is where you will see a shift. You will see a shift in the threshold. You'll see a shift in the end game of moral improvement of society, right? And opening citizens' minds and spirits to the public interest, right? So actively involved in political movement does something to you. You move out of your limited private interaction with the law to understanding how it affects everybody else, right? So today, when you just passively sit and accept the law, what happens after that is you pretty much go out and you pretty much look for how is it impacting others around me, right? And to the importance of defending their freedoms, right? So how do you know what are the freedoms you have unless you have actively participated in the political movement around you? And by political movement does not necessarily mean standing in elections or going and participating in them, but being a part of the political machinery that exists around us, right? And at this point, I would pose a question again. When we all went through school and we all went through universities and any other higher education program, and if you've studied here in India, at what stage, or if at all, did you understand the complete political machinery of India? Did you at any point have an education where you actually had exposure, or you actually learned the breakdown of the civic and the political apparatus that India has? That's a quick question, where you absolutely understood right from the bottom of the scale to the highest machinery of what are the different levels of institutions, of mechanisms, of people, of offices that hold the political scenario of this country together throughout your school or university. Anybody who kind of got that, understood that absolutely well. Absolutely, Raja, you're right. Civics still exist. Civics, I think, still exist. I had civics too, right? And what I remember about civics is this. Civics taught you what were your duties. It taught you the fundamental rights. It taught you the national symbols, and it taught you state directive principles, right? It taught you that, right? And it was you're right, it was a 20 marks paper. And did that subject really give you a breakdown of understanding of at what level do you really engage with different parts of the political scenario? Yes, absolutely. You're right. 20 marks are not important subject, unfortunately. You're absolutely correct. Because again, how citizenship or political involvement is placed today in education is from, again, a very passive spectator's place, right? It is taught from a place of discipline. It is taught from a place of passing on information if you may need it, you know. And the only way you can understand this is if you've gone on to, let's say, study law, if you've gone on to inside law, went on to study constitutional law, maybe then you have, right? Exactly. You're never taught how governments work in your city or your town. You're absolutely right. And there is data that backs this up. And that is where I'm going to take this as a cue to move to, what is it that citizenship education looks like, right? And I'm going to use something. So unfortunately, we don't have any empirical study done in India on how citizenship education is placed within the Indian education system. But there is something that has been done in Europe by Erasmus. But I found that study very close to what exists in India. So I'm going to use that as the reference point of my next set of conversation with you. So the study that it was an empirical study done by Erasmus in over 20 all the 28 European EU states, right? All 28 of them. And they went to schools and universities to see citizenship education, right?
Okay.
And they found that the teachers inside these institutions had three goals. One was discipline, two was autonomy, three was social involvement. All right, now these are important words, right? Discipline,
Yes.
we all understand, right? We all understand discipline. So disciplinary goal of a teacher education is based on making sure that the person understands the theory, the laws that exist, because it needs to interact with it, and he or she should be able to know what they are. The autonomous goal is based on giving the person an individual understanding. So the person is left to really make its own rules, make its own understanding of what it wants and how they want to interact, right? And the third one is social involvement, which is looking at society as a whole, community as a whole, and your place of interaction within that community and society, right?
Yes.
And now these three goals then evolve into the education models and embedding of citizenship in them, right?
Right.
So in European nations, especially Dutch countries, you see three models of these, all right? One is adaptive citizenship. Now the adaptive citizenship, the focus on discipline is really high, okay? It's really, really high. The values that you should know are considered embedded in the curriculum, all right? So the textbooks will talk of right and wrong, right? The civics book example that even we have, right?
Yes.
Teachers passing down the lessons on morals, on what is good, what is right, what is wrong, what is bad to the students, all right? Also in
Yes.
this, what ends up happening is that, and this by the way, is a very strong model of citizenship education in Netherlands and also in other Dutch countries, to be fair, all right? Then there is, of course, individualized citizenship teaching model, which is that it scores high on autonomy, all right? which means that you're looking at the child really, the student really coming up with his or her own understanding of how he or she will interact with the laws around him or her, right?
Yes.
But it's very low on social involvement. There is absolutely nothing there for the student to really think of community and how it impacts everybody around her. All right.
Yes.
Here children work a lot alone, pick up their understanding of values based on their interpretations. All right. And in this model there's a high level of competition, all right, because it's
Okay.
individualized, right?
Right.
There's a huge competitive leg, so because it professes that a student's education and his or her success is based on his or her hard work, all right, and
Right.
that, all right. South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, they rank really high on this model, all right. Then there
Okay.
is critical democratic citizenship model, which is high on autonomy, but also high on social involvement. Children work in active student dialogues. They look at diversity closely, because what will look very chaotic to somebody from outside is the fact that children are really learning to understand citizen and values and all of that through deep diving into communities around them. So it's
Right.
very high on understanding the social impact of things, right? And that is what you see happening in Scandinavian countries and Latin American countries, right? And I will give a caveat here. The kind of
Okay.
citizenship teaching methodology has a lot to do with that country's social orientation and democratic values. A lot
Okay.
to do with that. And you will see that reflected in the country's education policies. All right. So, for
Okay.
example,
Hmm.
um, the same study, when it studied the education policy of Dutch countries, Netherlands, what it found is that in the education policy, while the policy said that it wants the students to kind of be socially oriented, to understand values and all of that, it did not necessarily create the kind of atmosphere, the kind of resources that were needed to be able to create it.
Right.
So, what it did not necessarily do is that it did not, the policy did not necessarily provide any infrastructure, right, for the teaching methodology to really focus on teaching common values, democracy, and tolerance, right? So while education policy talks about
Yes.
children should learn tolerance, we should promote integration, we should promote equity, we should promote learning of equality. What ended up happening is that children were engaging with these topics very abstractedly, in huge abstract fashion. They were not interested in
Yes.
actively getting involved and understanding this. They were just not
Hmm.
interested. All right. And that was
Yes.
the biggest learning out of this study, which I think holds true and actively true also in India, right? Where we believe that a civics book
Hmm.
should pass down the understanding of a country's values, but it passes it down in a very abstract fashion, right? So students, by the time they go into high school, they go to universities, they know what politics is, they know what the
Right.
political stance of the country is, but they're
Yes.
not interested in getting their hands dirty and then understanding it,
Right.
right? and
Yes.
and that is how not just us, by the way, a lot of European countries are also positioned. All right.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not like we're alone in this, right? There
Yes.
is this exists even there. All right. So what I'll again take a pause here, again a lot of information, and oh, can't listen to you, Amrita. Amrita, can you hear me now? Am I clearer? I forgot to look at your message at that point.
You are audible here. Yeah, you are audible. But I think Amrita, I can listen you because she is now commenting. Yeah, it was vague. So I
Okay.
think she is able to listen to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So you were talking about this getting your hands. Now I can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now I can hear you. So I was saying, you were saying, getting your hands dirty and learning this citizenship thing. So it just reminded me of one of my experience. So I have one friend who stays in Hong Kong, and so those guys were like very much active in, nowadays what is happening, those student revolution, whatever is happening in Hong Kong. So these guys are kind of active there. So last year when he visited India, he was staying with us a few days at my place because he wanted to see how Indian culture is and how we all are doing, and our way of living, and all those things. So he made one presentation about Hong Kong, and he brought that presentation with him, and he was like visiting so many schools here and showing them how active participation and how actively and getting, how you can.
Ruchira, we lost you.
Am
So
I audible now?
yes, how actively we lost you at
Yeah.
how
Yeah. So I was saying how actively you can participate in this whole process and understand the importance of citizenship. And but there are so many
we lost you
consequences
again.
of that thing also, like, side effects of. Hello, am I audible now?
Yeah.
I think I have bad network today because it started running out. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I said, it has, it has so many consequences also, like, there are side effects of doing all this, getting your hands dirty and doing and understanding citizenship. So what is your take on that?
Absolutely. So this is what I was coming down to, right?
Yeah.
The side the I think what we miss out in this is that revolutions
Hmm.
have been the longest running part of human civilization, right?
Yes.
So there is no getting away from there, right?
Right.
As long as the concept of nation state exists, as long as our understanding of nationalism, of belonging, is constructed on the superficial artifact of nation state, we are going to have power plays. We are going to have a certain set of people asserting power and a certain set of people pushing against it, right? So there is no doing away
Right.
from that. But what is important really is that how do you build in this engagement with this machinery that decides citizenship right from an early age, right? How do you make
Right.
it more active participants right from an early stage rather than it reaching a point of only when it affects me will I do something about it, right? So,
Right.
and that's what I was
Yes.
trying to say. That if you think about it, currently India is also grappling with the construct, the definition, the concept of citizenship in regards to particular communities, right? And you
Hmm.
actually have students who who are studying
Yes.
law, who are studying citizenship, who have been studying this for a lot of years, are the ones at the forefront of opposing it, right? Uh, Now,
Right.
my and that's I think that's fabulous. That revolution is always a stronghold of any society. You know, the right to dissent is
Yes.
every society should have and has had, and you can't take away that right? What I am,
Yeah.
and if it makes me think, it makes me wonder, how would it change if you brought this back into school and you were able to actively promote this within the school structure, right? And if you were able to, from a
Right.
young age, you were able to get people, you know, um, to think about these values, to think about what values matter to them, right? And
Right.
what
Right.
will, so I'll give you an example, and that's what I was coming to at this point. I know there are a lot of people here who are probably participating in this hackathon and are looking at creating solutions around this topic.
Yes.
I think about some of these things, think about
Yes.
what would happen if how can you make students within schools become active participants in this model, right? How can you get students to start thinking of autonomy, to start thinking of um, really identifying and engaging with power holding institutions, right? Schools today still follow a top down approach of discipline. Can you think of solutions where you shift that power play and right from an early stage within schools, within any learning space, you're able to get students to think actively about the different facets of political participation? So, for example, you're not telling a sixth standard kid to go and fight an election, but rather, are you able to
Right.
processes within schools where the students take decisions collectively? Where
Right.
some participants in anything that's happening in the school that impacts them, right? uh,
Yes.
how do you promote political participation for them? How do you promote engagement with social movements around them, right? How do you,
Right.
and there are, by the way, some experiments happening in this space in India itself. There are people that are looking at citizen involvements, right? They're looking at citizen movements, right? In Bangalore, for example,
Yeah.
individuals for citizen rights, right, is a huge citizen-led movement, right? The Rewabe, REWABE, the Rewabe experiment in Bangalore was about citizens really standing up and making representations, attending ward meetings, going to the corporator every second Saturday, sitting with the ward corporator and asking, show us the budget, show us the plans for 6 months, show us what it means, right?
Right.
What is the possibility of inculcating these right from an early age, right?
Right.
How do you bring in the process of self-determination and the impact of it on people around you from an early stage, right? Decision making,
Yes.
questioning, really analyzing. In schools, for example, this is funny for me. When I was born in the 80s. I studied in the 90s, and computer labs were set up back in the 90s in all the schools, all right? And interestingly,
Yeah.
you were made to open your shoes outside the computer lab, all right? And
Yeah.
nobody knew why. Okay, like it was the most bizarre thing to do, but you had to do it,
Yeah.
and it was just, and for a lot of us it was just tedious, right? Like you have to go and move your shoes and then like enter and then you have to come out, wear them again,
Yes.
right? So it was
Yes.
because somebody somewhere in that system decided this, right? And and I remember
Yeah.
this point of time when I was like, this is just stupid, this is just like, I don't know, why do we do this? And I asked a teacher that, why is this done, right? And the response
Yeah.
is, because this is a rule, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it starts as something as basic as that. Amrita, to your question, literate in constitution and rights responsibility, that also is the next step. That to me also is something that is the next step. The first step to that is, can you make education systems more inclusive, keeping the student at the center of it? Can you create possibilities of young people taking active part in decision making, in collective decision making for that
Yes.
little community that they're a part of, which is called a school, right?
Yes.
We don't believe in schools at all, at least at Project DEFY, and we work with communities directly. and we
Yeah.
create learning spaces for them directly. But one of the things that we absolutely are married to is that we will not take decisions for them, right?
Right.
Self-governance and self-governing yourself is at the foundation of what we do at DeFi, right? And it's possible.
Right.
It is possible. It is not an
Right.
impossible thing to do, except that we have not thought of interesting, creative ways of doing this within the school system, right? And this is
Yeah.
for everybody to think about, not just
Yeah.
activists. This is for teachers to think about. This is for students to think about. This is for policymakers to think about. It's important to think about if citizenship at its base means a value system that an individual possesses, which are in line with the community in which they stay, then how do we get students to become actively uh, promoting it? Also, one important thing to think about here, I'll let all of you think about it, is the right to question, right? Uh,
Yes.
an important aspect of citizenship is the right to question. Question when a state nation is trying to take away a right, and
Right.
that's what we saw in Hong Kong, right? When students
Yes.
stand up, that's what we're seeing in India, where students are
Yes.
standing up, right?
Yes.
So from an early age, how do you inculcate this right and this um, almost this mind shift of questioning decisions, questioning how something impacts not just me but people around me, right? So uh, the so the shoe example, and she was to keep the dust out. Now here's the thing about dust, right? In a lab, in a computer lab, where you knew that the computers are going to go through wear and tear in any which case, right? And to scientifically accept that the computers are going to go through wear and tear in 2-3 years, irrespective of whether you have dust in the lab or you don't have dust in the lab, because the lab is not in a contained room. The lab is in a regular classroom style room, right? So,
With
so that,
AC. With AC in it.
not necessarily, not in the schools I went to. I went to army schools, so
Okay.
necessarily have
Yeah.
AC, right? So,
So when I was in, yeah, so when I was in school, I like it was in early 20s. So that time we also used to have, like, we were supposed to keep our shoes outside, and our computer lab was the only lab which used to have AC. So most of the students used to go to that lab just because there was air condition.
Amrita, you're right. You're right. Stop the child if it asks questions. You're absolutely right. And therefore, think about it. Therefore, I would encourage everybody who's participating in Eduthon to think about what are active ways to make this possible for students. Whether in schools, whether in learning systems, wherever, right? What are the ways to actively get students involved, to get students actively engaged, and to give them opportunity and spaces to ask questions? How can we do that,
Yes.
right? And I'm
Yes.
hoping some of you are able to think through those solutions during Eduthon, right? Because one, it cannot work in isolation. you know
Yes.
it, it's got to have some change in pedagogy. It's got to have some change in how teachers who are adults look at children who are non-adults, right?
Right.
Some of the shifting of those power structures, right? It's also got a lot to do with families, with parents, right? Of how they look at the child, right? And one of the
Yeah.
things we're also talking within the citizenship and democratic value is the child's agency, right? And the child at the center of the education system and not the other way around, right? So
Yes.
This is for all of you participating to think about what are the various creative ways you can create these spaces, and you can create these engagements and these models of getting children actively become participants in the political mechanism around us, instead of just learning it in a civics book and then forgetting it by the time they go to 10th standard, right?
Yes.
And knowing it just for the
Yes.
sake of a question paper, right?
Yeah.
If you were able to not really. I don't think pedagogy from citizenship is a big jump, because pedagogy also involves in itself all that will be passed on and all that will be given down to the student, right? And if
Yes.
we are talking about students becoming active citizens and people who will hold up values in a society, and it does not get reflected in the pedagogy, that means it's not reflected in the method of what you want to pass down to the student. If one of the inculcating values in a pedagogy is not that through every method we pick up to teach a student, there will be a back intent of making the student an active citizen, social citizen, a person who's able to interact not just for himself, then how are we going to do this in isolation, right?
Right.
Students becoming active citizens due to education is an educational objective for the state society to consider. But why is it something that that is an educational objective for the state and society to consider? So what do you think currently, Raja? This is a question to you. What do you think currently is the objective of education? Currently, what is the objective of education today? Of the education model as you know it today? How would you define it? Beats me. And I'll tell you, when you do this, a lot of people write this and they write it very openly. The objective of education today is to prepare people for labor markets. All right, and you will see this. Look at some of the exactly to prepare them for the labor market, right? Which means that the receiver of the education is just somebody who is there as a consumer. So you're not necessarily looking at these set of people becoming engaged, active citizens, right? And therefore, if you don't change the way pedagogy looks at it, if you don't change the way policies look at it, then you're not necessarily going to have students who are active citizens. But there are also ways to circumvent it, right? Can you change the way we currently teach citizen rights to children? Can you change the way currently children engage with society around them, right? Can you change the ways children look at their role in communities, within families, within the group of people they interact with? Can you change that? Is the question I think I will leave open to everyone during Eduthon, right? I know there are a bunch of specific sessions that are coming up. You brought up, for the state society to consider, there is a specific session that's coming up on education policies. So if you attend that session, you will actually hear and get to know who actually is at the center of the education policy. Is it even the child to begin with? Or is it some totally different agenda at the center of it? All right. So I think what at least 3 or 4 of us are trying to do through this theme is to see that are there ways to create innovative solutions to pass down citizen value education to children in the way and form it exists today. What you ask is to define the stakeholders in education system. Not necessarily. We're asking the stakeholders in education system currently, we all know is not the child. The child is not a stakeholder. And that is amply clear, whether you pick up the education policy, whether you pick up the way the schools deal with children, whether you pick up the way universities sell their seats. All right. So this, except the child, everybody else is a stakeholder. And that I can tell you, I'm not even asking you to define it. It's already defined. It is a consumerist system that currently exists. Now, within this consumerist system that currently exists, we are asking, are there innovative ways of engaging children beyond just the realm of studying something in a civics book? Are there innovative solutions of getting children to understand their engagement in the bigger political scenario? Can we make young people and young children active citizens instead of just passive readers of it? Objective of education system: integrate and assimilate a civilized society, achieve individual aims, objectives, or desires. Not necessarily either. Integrate and assimilate with civilized society, right? Even that is something that most societies want to say. All right.
Yes.
Civilized society, assimilation. These are words that were brought up to really push through a majoritarian agenda, right? And that is, and I say this, when you look at the way tribal education has for the longest time been demoted, for the longest time, not only in our country, but in country where you have had tribal communities, right? The First Nation conversation in Canada, for that matter, right? The tribal conversation in India, for that matter, where we have, for the longest time, in the name of civilized society, in the name of assimilation, said that the tribal knowledge that exists in these communities have to be done away with, and everybody has to be brought into this one standardized structure of education, the modern education for the labor market, right? We'll tell you that this objective is also consumerist objective. All right, the objective is not a tribal society, and absolutely it is, but then it does not necessarily ask you to assimilate. The amazing thing about individual tribes is that they never enforce assimilation, whereas the modern education system is based off on assimilation and forceful assimilation if it has to be, right? And absolutely nothing else can be allowed for, right? Which is what the battle is, which is what the battle the tribal counties, the tribal communities fight for, when they say we will continue teaching our children old practices and the way they were being taught earlier, right? So therefore, if you change the lens of how you see education policies and how they are built up, you'll realize that what became the focus of education. What is education for? Who is it serving? Who is it meant for? And that's where a lot of your answers will lie. And
Yes.
will I still be accepted as a tribe member if I do not subscribe to its norms? The tribes absolutely don't want you to constantly stay within themselves, right? You can move on from a tribe if you don't want to accept their norms. You can move out of it and you can go and become part of something else altogether, right? And that's okay with the tribe. What they do not do necessarily is they do not forcefully assimilate you. They do not pick kids or people from other places, put them into their tribes, and then forcefully make them follow that culture.
Yeah.
Right? That does not
That's,
exist.
I think that's how intentional communities starts, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
And
there is
that
this interesting concept called intentional communities, and I have read a lot about it by that one of this very well-known Australian researcher in this field. I forgot his name now. So he has written a lot about this thing, whatever you are talking now.
absolutely,
Yeah,
because Australia is a great example, right?
yeah, yeah,
We have original children, right? And
yes,
try to modernize them and try to civilize them,
yeah,
right? So you have enough and more examples there, right? And
Yes.
that also says something about citizenship in education and education methodology,
Yeah.
right? There is a certain need to not actively teach young children how to question values that the state nation is building. Correct?
Right.
There is an active suppression of knowledge, and there is active suppression of active participation when you don't focus on, when the pedagogy, when the curriculum, when the teaching methodologies do not focus on making them active participants, right? Because
Right.
it serves the larger agenda again, right? And that is what
Yes.
we're hoping we can find innovative solutions to, I hope, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So 9:15, Ruchira.
Yeah.
I will take a pause. Any questions anybody
Yes.
has? Last two
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Um,
So, guys, if you have any questions, please ask Megha. We will wait for next 1 minute. If any question comes, then we'll take those questions. Otherwise, we will sign off.
Absolutely. And for everybody, I will be sharing the papers, both the
Yes.
national
Yes.
study and
Yes.
the Stanford paper on understanding citizenship,
Yeah.
especially post-nationalist era. Those
Yes.
are very academic readings, but they probably will give you something to think about, especially the Erasmus study for the European nations on citizenship and teaching methodologies will help you think a little bit more about
Yeah.
how we can do it. We're not saying everybody has done it, right?
Yeah.
I'll definitely share that folder with you, Ruchira. Okay.
Yes, yes. And I think like there was like a previous session just ended like a few minutes back, and that's why um not all people can join this session. So I think they will go through the YouTube link or recorded version, and maybe if they have any questions, they will write back to you, or they will send their questions to us, and we will share them with you. So Megha will be with us for next sessions also. There are few more sessions under this category, and Megha will be conducting few of them. So I think people will get more chance to get in touch with you and know more about all these things and ask their questions. Raja is saying something, and there is one more point by Shilpa. She has written something here. I'll just read it for you. School advertise unknowingly making a child as a product, but the reality is child thinks for him herself. But different school module develop a different thinking or are disturbing equity in education. Why under RTE policy all schools come in public sector?
Can you paste it here? That
So
question.
yeah, it is there in the question and answer section. Can you just
Oh,
click and
inside.
check? Yeah,
Oh, okay. I
yeah,
will.
just
Okay.
yeah.
And
I
aura,
just saw it.
different school module develop a different thinking. Aura, disturbing equity in education. Okay. Um, I will answer your second question. The first part, Shilpa, if you can explain a little more, it will be helpful for me.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, what happens? Why everything came under the RTE was, so the point of RTE was to make education up to a certain age as mandatory. So after the age of 14 years, the government wanted everybody to have a question, to have an education. All right.
Yes.
And that is why under RTE, so RTE gives you the right to education up to 14 years. All right. It does not necessarily mandate all schools to become public schools. It says that up to the age of 14 years, education is a public right. And that is what RTE intended to do. It was again based off this post-liberalization understanding of education, which was that if you make somebody able to read and write up to the age of 14, they become productive members of the society. Again, this was based off on the labor market concept. It is based off on the same model of education that says that people have to become productive members of society. and being able to read and write were enough to do that. And so they can find some job, they can be engaged by the industry, and they again add profits to the industry. So that by the way is the construct on which RTE was formed, as well intentioned as any government wants you to believe it is.
Yeah.
Why not all schools in the public sector? Very good question, Shilpa. Why are some private, why are some public? So this is an interesting debate, both in health and education, by the way. In India, over the past decade or so, we have seen a shift to privatization and away from public holding. And the a simple answer to that is profits, Shilpa. So it's a straightforward answer. So both the medical sector and the education sector have been the worst hit, where they have made in the name of efficiency, in the name of better services, in the name of providing more fancy things, they have shifted the actually the responsibility of the nation, of the state, on to private holders, right? And this actually is the most debated thing right now in the country, both in these health and the education sector, because neither of them seems to be serving the purpose, right? So you brought in privatization, you brought in these players, it made both of these sectors super expensive. To buy basic medicines, you have to shell out a lot of money. If you want your kid to go to actually get quote unquote good education, actually I don't even know what it means, you've again shell out a lot of money for the kid to go to a private school. And what it has done is it has made the public schools and public hospitals worse off, right? Because now the solution that the government gives you is, send them to a private school or go to a private hospital, right? So the accountability of the state nation also in providing you public services for which you hold a right towards has also come down significantly, because if no more things, it's responsibility. So this is a shifting diameter, Shilpa, in any democratic, in any nation state theory, and in any of that, this is what signifies when a state is moving away from its sole responsibility and passing it over to private citizens. And what it also shows us, where does the government keep control then? So for example, in India, services that are fundamental to people's living are being privatized, whereas government is taking more and more hold over the basic aspects of a person's life. So citizenship, right? Right to give citizenship, um, being able to be called an Indian or something else, redefining state territories, right? So those are things in which at least the Indian government is getting more active, whereas it is taking a step back from its responsibility of taking care of welfare of its people. And the simple answer to that is profits. Both these sectors are profiteering, and there is a huge shift. This is again a postmodern affliction that has especially come to the Asian countries much later and happened outside much earlier. So the US and all of them have gone through this much earlier, and they face absolutely the same kind of lives in public schools and private schools, which are very distinct as we do.
Cool. So, guys, if you have more questions, then please write them in that form and we will share them with Megha, because time is almost up. We have already extended it by 23 minutes. Thank you so much, Megha, for this amazing session and your insights. And for participants, you guys know that from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., me and Sharwari are available at the given link. So if you have any queries or any mentoring you need, you guys can come there and meet us. So once again, thank you, Megha. So we will sign off for now. And if anyone has any question, they will write to us and we will send them to you. And also share those links and those papers which you mentioned. Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
So much for
Yes.
having me, guys.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much to all the participants as well. Bye bye.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.